This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.
Hey, this is Erin with Cornell Studio Supply, located in the Gem City of Dayton, Ohio. We are a proud sponsor of this episode and the Brickyard Network. Join us June 21st to 23rd with a hands-on workshop with Simon Levin and participate in a rocket kiln wood firing with Lisa Orr. Visit cornellstudiosupply.com to sign up. We are happy to help you with all your pottery and ceramic sculpture needs with the best customer service and world-class workshops. At Cornell Studio Supply, we are owned and operated for potters, by potters.
Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Welcome back to episode 514 of the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Today on the show, I'm talking with Lisa Orr. She started working with Low-Fire ceramics decades ago, moving through Mayolica before developing a unique psychedelic color palette. In our interview, we talk about matching thermal expansion of clay and glaze, side stacking of glazewares in an electric kiln, which she's the first person I've ever seen do that, and developing aventurine glazes, which have microcrystals that sparkle in sunlight. If you'd like to see examples of her work, you can go to lisaorr.com. This is one of a series of interviews that I'll be doing with artists that are featured in my upcoming book, The Complete Guide to Low-Fire Glazes for Potters and Sculptors. The book has its official release on September the 10th and is now available for pre-order. If you'd like to get a copy, you can order that on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. Before we get to this interview, I did want to thank the folks that have recently donated to our fund drive. We are listener supported, so I'd like to thank Marianne Hunn and Megan Yarnell for their recent contributions. If you'd like to get involved yourself, you can do that by going to talesofaredclayrambler.com/donate. Without further ado, we'll get to the interview. Well, yeah, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, it's an honor. Are you kidding? Yeah.
I've had this Low-Fire book in my head a long time, namely because it's hard to find one resource for a lot of different things with Low-Fire. You know, you end up going to like websites or other older books or whatever. So I'm trying to just basically congeal it into one place. So if we could give a 20-year-old who's just getting turned on to Low-Fire, they will start at a much farther ahead position than we had to with all the different research over the years.
That is great. And it also sort of endorses Low-Fire as a practical thing. Like I was just presenting in Brazil, and everybody's there is got this whole thing like, you know, oh, if it's Low-Fire, it's going to get bacteria and you're going to die. And I'm like, well, the people in the rainforest that are barely firing their Low-Fire aren't dead. And, you know, or at least not from that, you know, like I use Low-Fire stuff all the time and it's kind of fine. And, you know, all of our ancestors, like Low-Fire has gotten such a bad rap this last century.
Yeah, it was the smear campaign.
Definitely, you know, and, you know, people like Betty Woodman had to like legitimize it. But in the book where her stuff is on the cover, that other Low-Fire, one of the other Low-Fire ceramics books, it's full of lead glaze.
Well, I think that's what happened too, is that they just threw the baby out with the bathwater when it came to lead. because they're like, we can't have lead anymore, so let's just scrap all of that genre. And I don't think that's a very good idea, because with enough research, you can come up with tons of other stuff that is functionally okay.
Totally. And it's not all Gersley borate, which, I use Gillespie borate now. Real Gersley borate is that works, is really beautiful. Although bad Gersley borate did subvert my career for it derailed me for a year. Oh my God. It was 2001. And the one thing that changed was I'd gotten a new bag of Gersley borate, and nothing would adhere to my pots anymore. I would glaze and I would try to glaze again. And it's just oh my God, what is going on? And because that material is so variable.
Was it crawling?
Crawling like the size of a silver dollar. It was so bad. And I'm not making this up.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That sucks.
It sucked so bad.
It kind of makes sense, though. I bet you that it had more bentonite in that molecule, or more shrinking clays in that molecule than other batches. And so it just shrunk. I bet you it was shrinking before you even got it in the kiln. You just couldn't see that. And then it just went.
Yeah. No, I had just big patches that were empty on everything. And I had little kids also. And I was like, you know what? The world is telling me to just figure out and research this. And so it took me a while, and other people were going around having trouble with the Gersley borate mine. And so there was that Laguna borate, which wasn't that great of a substitute, but I've switched 100% to Gillespie borate, which was from Hamel and Gillespie. And it works. I still use that, and it works fine. And also if I switch back to Gersley borate, I'm always it usually works if it's some batch in some craft center somewhere.
Well, one of the things that I remember from your slideshow is that at some point, and this was years ago, you were making Maiolica, right? Wasn't it red clay, white glaze, brushwork over top of that?
Right. Oh, totally.
And then how did you change from that to white earthenware? Because that's one of the things I want to feature with you in the book, is using white earthenware. So what made the switch?
I was using Maiolica, I will say, because it was in San Antonio. Well, I didn't have Low-Fire translucent glazes, even though I loved those. And even though I was doing Ken Ferguson's first assignment for us, which was, it wasn't his first one. He gave us a lot, but, look to your great ceramic ancestry, go look in the Kodansha books, buy the Kodansha books from me, and then look in there and be inspired by that. Quit looking at each other and discontinue Ceramics Monthly. That's how you make unique original work. That was what I came up with. Anyway, and I loved that, there were some Tang Dynasty bottles in there that I even think a lot of them were in black and white, but you could tell there was color, and and they were dripping, and there was, that frosty matte and shiny a little bit. But I really wanted glazes that flowed. But in San Antonio, everybody was freaking out about lead glaze, because everybody had the habit of going down to Market Square, which is, where they brought everything that still had lead glaze at that time. You cannot import Mexican lead glaze pottery anymore. They do test it. They even test the newspaper that it's wrapped in the border. They test everything, and it cannot get across the border anymore if they test your shipment. But at that time, there was a whole lot of tortilla warmers, which everybody needed, even white gringo ladies. All of us, if anybody threw a party and it didn't have margaritas, salsa, chips, tacos, guacamole, queso, it wasn't a good party. We all had our Mexican embroidered, San Antonitos on. And because it was just that era. And people wanted lead-free pottery that was colorful, that reflected, the picados, the papel picados that everybody strung up. And so I had a hard time selling stoneware, to be honest. I'd had my, my stoneware and stuff like that, out in the back. I made lamps, and I did make tortilla warmers and stuff, but they were tasteful, but I needed to switch. I mean, well, it wasn't legitimate to make any kind of pottery in a non-durable stoneware, i.e. cone 10 reduction. And you couldn't turn it in for a grade at UT, and I am not making that up. And I had gone to UT Austin. And so in 1985, I think, I don't remember whose recipe it was, but somebody, published a Maiolica recipe, and Deb Groover was kind of going around teaching stuff in the later 80s, teaching like layers of Maiolica. Walter Ostrom, he was starting to be more known. And, with I guess it's Lance clay, and that's available in Canada. And we were looking at each other going, can we get away with this? Can we do this? And my friends and I were like, let's just try some, And so we got some, and I think Bat's Maiolica was an early one. It pinholed real bad on our local red terracotta school children clay. And, but anyway, I don't remember whose Maiolica I wound up using or how I amended it a little bit. But anyway, I found a Maiolica that, worked, and I painted it with, I don't know, some kind of overglaze stuff. And I think it was Frit. It was Gersley Borate and Frit in the beginning. And then I changed it was Gersley Borate and Stain. Then I changed to Frit and Stain because it was a little bit better. And just kind of did something with a brush. And I had taken a Japanese brushwork class for a long time when I was at UT as just as a recreational activity. And so I knew how to hold a brush a little bit to get some line quality. My stuff wasn't amazing. Mitsuko Harazumi, my teacher, did not approve of anything I ever made. She never let me change to color from black and white. I never made it to the next level, but I had some idea. Anyway, so I did brushwork on that early stuff. But I did, after I closed my store, literally, I would switch over to mixing up clay and water in a blender and trying to add dots, doing some colored clay applications, trying to figure out how to mold something and make a mold of that and stick it on my pot. And I fell in love with Betty Woodman's, that Low-Fire book with that cover with all the lead glazes. I'm giving you the whole story.
Yeah, this is good.
I talked to my therapist. Okay, so I took Chris Daly's workshop. So this is a redux of my slide lecture without the slide. But anyway, you can imagine. So we had the best craft center in San Antonio by a miracle. The day I graduated was the day, we got the former director of Anderson Ranch, who brought every friggin' buddy. I had Michael Simon twice. I had Chris Daly twice. I had just name everybody: Ron Myers, Clary Illian, Toshiko, Ken Ferguson, Rudy Audio, the list is long. And every couple of months we had one of these megastars right there for 4 days. It was a long weekend workshop. It was always Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, one of those deals. We were going to have Paul Soldner, but nobody signed up for me. I had my bikini ready. Oh my God. Everybody was like, no. I'm like, come on. Get that. Let's find somebody with a hot tub. This is going to be great. No, I wasn't sure about that. Anyway.
I know you're joking about that.
Yeah. No, I mean, everybody was like, this was really important to me. Clary Illian said, I would always drag my pots in from my store because I had a little storefront. I had done craft shows for years out of my, parents' garage, and, one a month to try to do my little pile of bills and pay them. And somebody who had a little weaving shop on this tiny little corner, that it was only open 2 days a week because their rent was like $150 a month. I think they changed it to $250 a month. And it was this little space, and it had been a burned out railroad car. So that's the size it was. And before that, before the weaving guy got it, it was a barbecue pit, which was still in there. The big old like clay smoker was in there. I just used it as a display because it had a cover on it. It kind of smelled like barbecue, not going to lie. It wasn't the best, but it was an adorable, tiny little craft store made of sort of stuccoed old train burned out rail car, which is like so San Antonio. It's like, oh, here's something. Let's turn it into something else. And in this little like depressed downtown area, which turned out to be a real popular restaurant strip. So it was kind of perfect. And I didn't get hardly any business in there, but the people who came in usually bought a tortilla warmer or a potpourri steamer or some whatever I was making at the time. And I'm telling you what, when in 1985, 86, whenever I switched to Maiolica, my stuff sold so much better. I paid off my car because people know what to do with lead-free, colorful kitchen things. And so I framed the food with Maiolica. And because there's already a Maiolica tradition in Mexico of all those lead glazed at that time, some were switching, but the switch was just barely occurring. But, mine was lead free and it for sure. And it was right there. And so, and it kind of looked like some of the colorful Mexican stuff that was up on the border. My stuff was more expensive at the time. Now, some of those Maiolica plates are twice the price of my current retail plates. It's ridiculous. Like somehow they just really, they moved their prices up with all that fancy decoration, with all the blue and white.
At what point did white earthenware become the thing you wanted to work with?
Oh, so my therapist. So, I got my therapist said, before you come in next week, you are going to call the University of Colorado Boulder and you're going to find out how much it cost. I was real freaked out about the price of kind of wrapping up my business. I was super worried about burnout because other people I saw had burned out. I was doing some wholesale shows and stuff, and it was a lot to fulfill orders. And I saw friends who had early success in that and they burned out. So I switched after I called Colorado, found it was only $200 to take their extension class, which is like continuing ed. Their continuing ed class, whether you were out of state or in state, didn't matter. And with Betty Woodman. And so it took me a year to wrap up my business, pay off all my bills, get a little pile of money, and say goodbye to that comfy little storefront and go move to Colorado and study with Betty. And my plan was to come back because I let another artist stay there. And, and I said, I'm coming back. You're going to give it back to me in 6 months. But anyway, then I moved to the University to Minnesota and went and studied at the U with Mart Ferris.
Who also was doing Low-Fire. You seem to have hit the Low-Fire people.
Yeah, barely at the time. There were some big buckets, kind of the glazes he uses now. There were some big trash cans of that stuff in the school. And he's like, you should use those. And I was like, man, they were opaque and matte. And I did not know what to do with that. But I still was using, I'm trying to remember now what I was, I have slides of these, I was still using some of the glazes, some of the class glazes from Betty's classes. But we had a whole bunch of different glazes we were testing. But I was really proud of myself. I took this one high soda ash glaze. It had soda ash and Frit 3110. So it's soda. And I made a real pretty green that everybody liked. It was one of those, I was trying to go for that lead green at UC Boulder. And that was my little claim to fame there. It was Lisa's gorgeous green. So, anyway, I still use a version of that.
When you switched though from the dark body to a light body, at that point you weren't doing the sidge yet, right? So you were literally changing the color of the ground of the pot. So how did you wrap your brain around it's not dark in the background anymore, now it's bright ass white?
Okay, Betty had us using both. So we had both. And so there was but she was using white clay. And it was a really punky clay. You know, the things that she made all those pillow pictures out of. We were using her clay body. Was, it was a lot of New York talc and, a little ball clay, a little of everything. And just basically it was a friendly, very nice textural, toothy body that even if you bisted it to cone 4, 5, 6, like it would have probably not melted, it was super punky. And we had some of us were doing terracotta, and we were all supposed to be, we took Colorado, UC Boulder got use of a color Xerox, which was a really brand new technology at that time. And also Islamic pottery was something that she was encouraging everybody to look at. And that was real new on the scene. And so we all had, everybody got to make 10 Xeroxes out of 10 color Xeroxes. And we were supposed to be inspired by those or remake those. And so some of them had a dark clay body and some of them had light. And so people were using both in the classroom. And we were using this engobe that went on wet dryer bisque, which was really nice. So we could, and it was a Pete Pennell engobe. I still use that thing because I'm always tinkering with my clay body, because otherwise I was just using my clay body as a slip, my clay body to add some stain to it, because that also works real good. So I did the switch. I didn't do the switch then because I was doing everything. I'm like, I am sinking into this with all my teeth, grabbing on. And so we did low soda. We did high soda. We did salt. We did low fire. We did Onagama. She got us out to Balistrary's kiln and we fired out there. And we did, low fire white and low fire red. We were just trying everything. So it was at UC Boulder, but I felt the most, and I was bisquing hot, like I would bisque also to cone 10 sometimes and then do low fire. So I didn't narrow it down until, I don't know, in Minnesota, I was also doing some high fire soda and some low fire. So I didn't settle on it. Like I was working on it starting in 1989, 1990, but then I don't think I settled on it till grad school I guess it was the fall of 1990.
In Minnesota, I'm trying to think of aesthetically what was happening then. Like, was it oddball to be making or wanting to make brighter work at that time in Minnesota, just coming out of the Warren McKenzie era, which was a little more subdued?
It was oddball. I think it was. But there were some people making some crazy things. Low fire was embraced there. And oh my God, there was some, like I'm trying to remember some of the other people and what they were making. And there was a lot of low fire and a lot of just engobes on low fire. And that was perfectly fine. One woman was trying to make a whole bed, like she was making a bedstead, with like for canopy curtains, and it was all low fire, and she was low fire red, and she was carving it after she'd put engobes on it. And there was another guy that was making, oh my God, these aliens with eyeballs coming out all over the place on little stems, and they were wildly rainbow low fire, and everybody was like, okay. Mark Ferris was, I think for me, I'm trying to remember my low fire stuff at that point. It was a little more monotone, I think. I didn't put like a whole bunch of colors like calico all over the place. But I would do like a green saucer and a, yellow mug with a green inside or something like that. Or just all blue, all turquoise blue and textured. What he argued with me on, which was very fun, was if I put a a sprig in the middle of a picture that had nothing else, okay, one sprig right in the middle, he would always like, was that necessary? I'm like, oh, probably not, but God, the restraint it took me.
Well, what's hilarious is then in grad school, restraint goes out the door. I mean, it seems like that was the point in which you gave yourself permission to use color in the way that felt natural to you? Or how would you describe that? Like, what was the breakthrough?
I think the breakthrough was it was John Gill, like, working with me a little bit. He goes, "What is your stuff about?" And I'm like, it's about colorful glass. It's about, he goes, "No, your stuff is a garden, you know." And then he was like, "Let yourself rip." And so I began to figure out, like, how to bring more, and it just really relaxed me to just do whatever I wanted. And I felt the freedom to just test more and more glazes, which I did, and get more and more, bring more and more color in, and kind of like try to figure out how they went together, kind of like a Sherwin-Williams consultant or something.
Because I remember seeing those pictures of your thesis show, how well defined the work was at that point. It seemed like the idea almost came out fully formed. Did you feel like that at the time?
No, but I felt like I was just finally in my milieu, in my depth, in my world. And everybody was like, "Okay, that's fine." And I also was trying to move it more and more, move my clay back, because back in the day, oh yeah, like Cynthia Bringle, like, it was so such a big deal when somebody made something that wasn't round from the pottery wheel. And like, it was, I was still trying to get, like, use the wheel, like, soak in the idea of using the wheel as a tool to make things that were any shape at all. And so I was experimenting with that. And Josh DeWeese was overlapped with me 1 year. So there was Josh right down the hall. Like, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, he can move some clay.
He can move some clay. He can make it not round.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online resource for research and inspiration, featuring photos of over 4,000 objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great resource for students and teachers. To find out more, visit rosenfieldcollection.com.
The Bray Clay business is your best source for Bray epoxy, a two-part moldable epoxy intended for post-firing repairs. Working like clay, it's easy to shape, texture, fill gaps, and recreate missing parts. Bray epoxy is sold in tan, white, and black base colors, and we also have a 9-color kit that will allow you to perfectly disguise your repair. Order online anytime at archiebrayclay.com.
Well, this is good to hear about this history, this progression, but can you start now from where you're at in the present moment and just describe what materials you're working with in terms of clay, sidge, glaze, and the combination of all of that?
I use high COE glazes, and because those are the ones that, for the most part, will give me a non-crackly surface. So like when I was working with Betty, and we all were, there's some talc in there, like 25% or something. It wasn't a huge amount compared to what I'm using. But all of our stuff was crazed like mad. Like, it was crazed, and it didn't matter. Like, we weren't even looking at that. And or we were, and it was just part of the charm. And so I, throughout the years, have tried to I want to say one other thing. When I was at Alfred, we went around and visited lots of factories, and they bisque hotter, like Homer Laughlin, bisques to cone 10 and glazes. I don't even know how low, but lower. They spray their glaze on. When I started doing that, I used to get working with low fire can be troublesome because you're sealing the surface of the skin before the gases can come out if you bisque traditionally 08 and then fire 04 or something like that. So when you swap that and you bisque to at least 04, which is my glaze temperature, better yet 01, 1, 2, or 3, which my clay can do, then you get this very durable thing. Yeah, it's still porous. It's still like if you soak the bar, it's going to soak in, it'll have like at least like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12% absorption. It'll still have absorption, but it's pretty dang durable if you round the edges like a flower pot. So that said, that is what I do. And it works great for me. So right now I'm bisquing to 01. I'm looking at changing to 1 if I can get it right. I need a high talc clay body. There isn't another ingredient. I need that magnesium in there so that it matches the coefficient of expansion of the glaze for the color I want, which is turquoise, turquoise, turquoise. I am going for luscious, like Egyptian paste turquoise, which is what you get when you use high soda glazes with extra soda ash in them and high talc. And I mean, technically, my stuff is a pain to make. Like it really is. So I make my stuff and there's not that much clay in my clay. Like my clay recycles real quick because there's like 38% clay.
Oh, wow.
And the rest of it is talc and whiting and stuff like that. Yeah. It's super low clay.
Yeah, we've never talked about this. I'm so glad that we are, because what I like about this is that you're taking an industrial idea in terms of bisque high, glaze low, and then you're thinking, or seems like your thought process. How do I then maximize this clay for the glaze style that I want?
Right.
And I know this has taken a lot of research to get all of that
so
right.
Much. I am still doing it. I still am daily, not daily. Okay, that's an exaggeration. Monthly and weekly, corresponding with Bill Carty to like nail it down to what I got. I stockpiled a massive amount of talc from New York Talc because all the companies are getting that had it in their plant. If somebody finds out, if some customer who is litigious finds out they had it in their plant, they're getting sued. So they're still making low-fire Christmas tree slip cast clay body, but they're not using talc anymore. Or they're not using, I don't think they're using Johnson & Johnson talc. Or I don't even know if Nital and Johnson & Johnson, I bet that was the talc because it's very nice. It's very silky.
But Nital was the white talc, not the gray talc. The gray
talc.
The
gray talc is the Texas talc, which is horrible. That was Pioneer Talc or TDM. It's had a bunch of names over the years because they kept scooting the mine over that family that owned that spot. So then they'd move 30 miles away. And then the characteristics would all change, but they would do a direct substitution. All our clay bodies would ruin. It was like all kinds of problems. Plus, there's 2 kinds of talc, according to Pete Pinnell. There's the spiky talc, and then there's the platelet talc. And Texas talc is the platelet talc. The platelet talc is nice and silky as a feel, but when you roll it, it frays. It's horrible to use.
So you need the spiky talc to basically hold the other clay's molecules together.
Correct. Now, I will say this about talc. So so I don't know if anybody is left mining it in the USA. I do know that my clay supplier in Texas, in Austin, Armadillo Clay, so they're importing from China to make their low-fire clay, and now the clay is pink colored. I think Laguna's doing the same thing because their new B-Mix Cone 5 or Cone 6 is also pink colored. That stuff is pink. So that's a super interesting thing. And I don't know anything about that other than that, that it's a pink colored. And I would bet dimes to dollars that Laguna's also getting it and putting it in there. And that's probably where Armadillo's getting it also, is through some larger entity. Anyway, that's conjecture on my part. But that's from observation. Anyway, Alfred has removed all talc from all shelves completely.
So what does that mean though probably no one has figured out a white low-fire a true don't bisque high, but like a just bisque to 04 low-fire body. No one is using that, right?
Yeah, they still are. They're still selling something to school children in Texas. It's the pink stuff.
Okay, gotcha. Because as soon as I heard that talc was running out, I thought about you. I was like,
Oh yeah.
what's Lisa going to do?
Lisa bought so I bought from a large clay company that we all know the name of, and I'm sworn to secrecy on.
Okay.
I bought 4.5 pallets, 5 pallets, something like that from them. And I bought a clay mixer, and I'm like, fine, nobody, because they're like, we will not mix it anymore. And then this place that I used to also get it from, they were like, no. I had a whole bunch of it, and I said, hey, Starworks, will you do it? They're like, oh, hell no, no talc, no, no. And anyway, I have a filter press now.
Oh,
and
wow.
I have it's Allegheny's old one that given to Andy Brayman. Andy Brayman was going to scrap it unless I came and got it. And I'm like, don't touch that filter press. I'm coming. So anyway, I haven't set it up yet. But Bill Carty, he's like, when are you going to use that filter press? Because that thing is going to be the best.
Well, even with my red terracotta, I have gotten it in the past through a guy outside of Oakland that was filter pressing it, and it was way different. Like the clay was amazing filter pressed.
Amazing. They used to filter press, like Starworks actually got their filter presses from the outfit in Marshall, Texas. It's called Blackjack Clay, or they sold to Marshall Potters, but Blackjack Clay, which is in Athens, Texas, which doesn't even have a town really. It's like a dot of a gas station. But anyway, this tiny place, and they mined clay and they filter pressed it over there. And because you have to filter press all the clay from Texas because it's full of caliche limestone. Anyway, so yeah, I am basically going through my life I have certain colors I want in my head. I have certain effects I want that I find in my brain. And I am forcing my clay body to try to behave in the context that, that are for the glazes I want. I now have so many pallets of talc. I have 16 plus my original 4. So that I have like 20, which is a lot. I've calculated like how many pallets I can use if I live to 103, like my grandmother.
So one of the other things you do is that you glaze the whole pot, which we have a butter dish of yours that we use every single day, and we look at it and I'll just pick the lid up, and I'm always thinking like, how did she do this? But there's a process you developed of stilting or laying against the side of the kiln, which allows you to glaze the whole thing. Can you explain how that works with glazes that also run? Like, how does it not end up being a kiln disaster?
It's taken so long for me to figure that out. So one of the things I do is now on my cups, I've tried stopping glazes, like some kind of matte glaze or something around the bottom. And I still think about stopping glazes. And that's one of my future ways to go, is like put a stopping glaze on there. But I love the idea of sealing the whole pot, because it was something that I was told was kind of cheesy to do. But it's so funny to me to have it all glazed all over. And then you can just like slide it on the table. It's so, I slide it down the bar. It's kind of slippery way. And also, oh my God, this is where I got the idea, was from going to Mexico and buying a like seeing a guy, with like super drippy Oaxacan dripware. So this was in the 80s. They were still barely doing any Oaxacan dripware. And anyway, so somebody in the market had a bag of teapots and a bag of lids. And I'm like, which? And I'm like, ooh, I'll buy a teapot. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, well, which lid goes with it? I don't know, whichever one you like, and they're, and so I'm like, that's going to be one of my shows, is you buy a teapot and you pick out a lid to go with it. Won't that be great?
That will be great.
Same with tops and bottoms with the butter dishes. And so the sooner you get there, the sooner you can pick out the perfect. But they're all glazed all over because they were propping them up on little nails. So the glazed surface that meets is so, I don't know. It's kind of like, I love a Robbie Lobel, lid that goes into that, it has that little grit, the way it, sits in that, it bites almost with clay on clay. but there's also such a humor and fun in like slippery glaze on glaze. So maybe not in something like Bilique where, that kind of doesn't grab me so much, but but when it fits beautifully like that, I don't know. I love that. And so I'm sorry if I got off topic, but I'll tell you about the so my process is at the current time, the very best thing is stainless steel. Stainless steel. So I use little stainless steel spikes that are the size of like a thick coat hanger. And I just cut them up into little 1-inch chunks and then stick them in a Hershey Kiss of clay. And then they can be as big as you want or as little. You just put 3. The thing's not going to slump. It's already bisque hotter than it's going to be. And I put on the bottom, I put a half strength. So I take one of my glazes, which is one of the sparkly aventurines, and I just paint it thinly on the bottom. And again, I got this from Mexico because I have this gorgeous platter from a town called Sinsunsan, which is in Michoacan. And I want to give credit. It's an unknown craftsman from Sinsunsan, Michoacan. And on the back, they wiped it with so there's these beautiful finger wipes, which can't stick very well to anything. And it just makes the back of the plate look just as good as the front. And it's just thinned out glaze.
How thin? Like half strength?
Half strength. Yeah. Like they clearly dunked it and wiped it off, half thickness. So there's matte and shiny back there, but there's a little coating on everything.
It's such a good idea because if you think longer back before we had glaze, that people think that there were fats that were rubbed on ceramics, oils, things that were not glazed, like they were treatments to help,
sap.
Exactly, to make those really early pots, and we're talking like thousands of years ago, be able to be watertight because they weren't cared about bacteria growth. They were cared about can this hold water?
Contain. Yeah.
But you mentioned adventuring glazes, and that's another thing that's pretty specific to your work is the research you've done into that. Can you explain what that is and how it works?
Yeah, as best I can. An adventuring crystalline glaze is a super saturated glaze with some kind of colorant. And from my understanding, as much of the colorant dissolves as it can. And my first one was iron aventurine, and so yes, it was supposed to be an amber glaze, and I was trying to get it to be more ambery. I'm like 10%, 15%, 20%, 25%, 30%. So I like to go the extremes just to see what on earth will I get. So I made these extremes in this one alkaline base with that had some lithium in it. And what else does it have that's interesting? I can't remember. But the extra iron that can't dissolve in the glaze matrix as it's cooling, the extra pieces attract to each other and go to these little clumps, and the slower you cool, the more of the little clumps you get. And so the more glittery and opaque the surface will be in an aventurine glaze. And you can get it not just with iron. I have an aventurine green, but it's got a god-awful huge amount it's got 8% chrome in it. So you can put it maybe on the outside of something. And the aventurine crystals, you can't see them indoors. You can only see them in the sun. But I never put that on the inside.
Well, I would imagine that stains also wouldn't work. It's got to be the raw metallic oxide so that it can move around in that way in the melted glaze.
Yeah, I have never heard of it with stains. I have heard of it with other. I've heard tell of it. With other oxides, with manganese or something, and I tried with all these other oxides, and all I got was kind of like sandpaper. I would get a pretty color and maybe crystals, but it felt like sandpaper. And like, ooh, chalkboard, no, strike a match on it maybe.
So when you think about putting all these things together, that's the other thing that seems totally you, is that you'll have that turquoise glaze and underneath it will be, some red underglaze. And then beside that will be the adventuring. So you have three pretty high contrast things, but when you put them together, they resonate at a frequency that's unexpected, but is very you. So can you talk about understanding, like, now you got the glazes, how do you understand them visually so that you can use them on the pots? Like, do you have a personal sense of color theory? Maybe is an easier way to ask that question.
I wish I had a good answer for that. It's mainly for movement, I think. Like I would put things so that they would drag down and emphasize texture in some way. Like big globs. Like if you put a big dollop of glaze, I don't know, the size of a Q-tip or something, just a big glob, like it'll go down and make a line and it'll follow your texture a little bit. Or I'll put that above some texture and have it kind of trickle through and emphasize whatever's going on. I don't think I have a very good sense of color theory.
Well, it feels like your brain, though, has a sense of color theory because your instincts lean in a direction that I really appreciate. And I think some of it is, going back to what we talked about in the beginning, being in the San Antonio, in the Borderlands area, there is an aesthetic of color in paper and fabric and, all these non-clay things that definitely has now come into your clay life. I've been at shows with you, and it's amazing to watch the crowd walk around the exhibition. And when they come to your work, there is a sense of happiness that I think comes across because there's a playfulness with the color combination.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the exuberance of, back to what John Gill said, his insight, which is I tend to think of them as a wild garden, as the garden colors. And I am trying to frame the food with garden color is my elevator speech, I guess. And the exuberance of things being a little bit wild and a little rangy and I guess having so many Mexican pots that are glazed with splashes of color everywhere that are all running, I feel like that's more than okay. And one time this lady at the American Pottery Festival, her friend, she was looking at a cup and she said, and her friend said, "You should buy that." And her friend said, and the lady said, "No, I'd be too busy looking at it." It's like it's sort of too busy and it's got too much stuff going on. But I kind of love that. Like the closer in you get, that there's some more interesting color dripping through here or there. Maybe there's a texture that's being highlighted that you want to look at or something like that. I'm trying more and more to frame sections of the pot, like here's the middle and it's going to be this bunch of colors, and here's the edge, the middle bottom outside, and that's going to be a different color, kind of more concentric rings so that my focal point can be in the middle. But I think that is what I'm kind of thinking. And I do think it's a weak point of mine that Betty Woodman, when she was kind of done teaching and she was leaving and going to Italy or whatever, she was like, I like these glazes that move, but I'm kind of wanting the color to stay where I put it now. Like she was just in her mind, she was kind of being done with those fluid, like wall things that had other things sitting on them and the shadows behind. She was really transitioning to the color staying where she put it, which I was always like, well, not me. So, and I'm still not me. Whenever I see, like I was just at the Harvard Museum the other day and in the Islamic section, and I was like, this is what I want, this kind of color and movement. I'm going to take you to a pot in my bedroom I really like that's Mexican. Okay, this one here is really rare. This might be the most valuable one. It's a Guanajuato from the mid 1800s. And usually they're like little animals and stuff, real quirky animals. But anyway, This stuff is very rare and highly sought after. It's a miracle I found one. This one's all greasy.
That's side fired though, right?
It is. And do you know how they did that? They raku those out of there.
Oh, wow.
They do. Right when it's the hot temperature, they like take their tin off the top and get some metal sticks and yank them out one by one. And have you seen that? Okay, so it's on Pots in Action. I posted a long time ago in the Mexico section that I did, like 4 years ago or whatever. Just go way down, find Mexico. It's a Chris audio video from the 70s or 80s. And he has these ladies from Tsinsunsan, taking the stuff out with the tongs. Because that was how they keep them from sticking together, which is amazing. Low fire technology.
Yeah.
Right? It's raku, not for smoke effect. It's raku for practicality, because you can see it in a whole bunch of the little Mexican cups. You can tell they were all stuck together. That's how you handle with no shelves. They're all stuck together. They were pulled apart and it smooths over like honey, but you can still see the stuckety stick part, but it smooths. It's like, well, I always wondered how they did that. And because they don't have shelves, they line up the plates like this, dunk, 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 and they just yank them out real fast. Oh, Mexico. Sorry.
Well, if you had kind of a list of icons of low fire, it seems like that actually one of the icons would be unnamed Mexican potters who have not really been given their due.
Right.
Like they made amazing pots, but who else is on that list? Who are the other icons or regions that you feel are like the pinnacle of low fire?
I would need to think of this. If I forget any, if I think of them later, over a sandwich, I'll have to email you. Well, Nishapur.
Oh yeah.
Like I am big, huge fan of Nishapur. Byzantine, the Byzantine tricolor ware.
That rope texture with the glaze running over it. So good.
Oh my God. And just like the birds carved, bird, just like the quick sgraffito. So Nishapur, Byzantine, Tong, but everybody knows that.
Well, see, I think Tong is that tricolor stuff, I think is what, when you say fluid glaze, that's what most people think of. Like that was, I don't want to say it's the start of something, but as that stuff was exported over the Silk Road, you see a lot of it in other, like Uzbekistan, all the stands had some version of that. Then you get, over into Europe, you see it again in other places. So it is interesting how it's an idea that keeps switching cultures, but it's a technology also. It's a low-fire glaze technology.
Low-fire, man, that led. Wielden, big fan of Wielden. And then I would say, what did I say? Guanajuato. I think it's called Guanajuato ware, but it's the antique Guanajuato ware. I could send you pictures of better ones than that. And they're from Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, for example, in their house. Like they had a whole Trastero thingy full of it. They loved Guanajuatos, but they were antique even then.
Well, this was great. Thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Hey, and I'm really enjoying the podcast so much.
I'm glad to hear it. Cool.
Okay.
I'll see you.
Bye.
I'd like to thank Lisa for her generosity of time and spirit. It was great to spend some time with her looking at her collection. I actually cut out about 20 minutes at the end of this interview where she just took me around her house showing me historic and contemporary pots that are all in the low-fire genre. As you can tell, both of us are really passionate about low-fire ceramics, and I'm hoping that my upcoming book will help energize a wave of new potters to be interested in that. Again, if you'd like to pre-order the book, it's called The Complete Guide to Low-Fire Glazes for Potters and Sculptors, and it's available wherever you get books. Before we go, I'd like to thank today's sponsors. That's the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art, Cornell Studio Supply, and Bray Clay. If you or your organization is interested in becoming a sponsor on the show, you can get in touch at brickyardnetwork.org. I'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes Podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.